My family called me selfish for refusing to babysit. Then they tried to take $25,000 after banning me from Thanksgiving. My whole family completely lost it. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts, accusing me of being selfish because I refused to cancel a vacation I'd been planning for almost 11 months just to babysit my brother's kids. Instead of arguing with anyone, I turned my phone off, boarded my flight, and left all the drama behind. Looking back, I've always been the responsible one in the family, which is ironic because the youngest sibling is usually supposed to be the reckless one. Marcus was the golden child from the day he was born, the oldest son who could do absolutely no wrong in my parents' eyes. He played baseball, got the biggest bedroom in the house, and Mom and Dad showed up to every single one of his games like they were watching the World Series. Elena was the outgoing one who could charm her way out of just about any situation. Then there was me, Nadia. I stayed out of trouble, got good grades, kept my head down, and somehow became the person everyone expected to be available whenever they needed something. I was invisible in the way dependable people usually are. Nobody notices the foundation holding a house together until it starts cracking beneath them. Elena and I have always been much closer to each other than either of us has ever been with Marcus. When we were kids and our parents started screaming at each other, she'd sneak into my room, put on a movie, and drown out the noise. When my prom date bailed on me at the last minute, she picked me up herself and told me I looked way too good for a guy who wasn't worth my time anyway. The only problem is that Elena has always been wired to avoid conflict at all costs. In private, she'll tell you exactly how she feels, agree with you completely, but the second someone needs to say those same things out loud in front of the family, she disappears. I can't really blame her. I can't. We all grew up learning to play different roles, and hers was keeping the peace. Mine was carrying everyone else's weight. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-sized construction company in Austin, Texas. It's a solid job with decent pay, but our schedules are packed, and every vacation has to be planned months ahead. Back in January, I sat down with my boss and mapped out all of my vacation time for the year. I had 21 paid days off, and for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to scatter them throughout the year. I was going to save every single one and finally take the dream trip I'd been talking about for years. 3.5 weeks in Spain. Madrid, Barcelona, the Costa Brava, maybe even a day trip to Girona. I'd wanted to visit ever since college, after my roommate came back from studying abroad with photos that honestly made me jealous. I opened a separate savings account just for the trip, spent months comparing flights, booked an Airbnb in Gracia with a terrace overlooking the Bezos River, and during my lunch breaks, I'd practice basic Spanish on my phone. This wasn't some last-minute vacation. It was something I'd been working toward for months and dreaming about for years. Now here's where my family enters the picture. Marcus got married young. He and his wife, Vanessa, have 3 kids, 6-year-old twins Dylan and Ruby, plus little Felix, who had just turned 2. I love those kids more than I can explain. None of this is about them. The real issue is that Marcus and Vanessa treat the rest of the family like we're a free babysitting service available 24 hours a day. Every date night, every unexpected problem somehow turns into someone else's responsibility, and most of the time that someone ends up being me. My mom, Diane, encourages the whole thing without ever questioning it. In her mind, Marcus's kids are the center of the universe, and the rest of us are expected to revolve around them. If Marcus needs help, you help him. If he's overwhelmed, you step in. Elena avoids most of these requests because she lives in Portland, so distance gives her an automatic excuse. I live only 25 minutes away from Marcus, which means there's never really a good excuse for me to say no. Over the last 4 years, I've probably given up more than 50 weekends to babysit. I've skipped concerts. I missed a friend's birthday trip to Nashville. I rearranged a work conference once because Vanessa had a dentist appointment she claimed couldn't be rescheduled. Every single time I convinced myself it was only temporary, that I was being a good sister and a good aunt, and eventually things would settle down. They never did. The requests became more frequent, the favors got bigger, and the appreciation kept getting smaller until it barely existed at all. Marcus never actually asked me. He simply told me what was happening. There was never a, "Would you mind helping us?" It was always, "Nadia, we need you Saturday." Like I worked for him instead of being his sister. And if I pushed back even a little, my mom would call to remind me how difficult things were for Marcus and Vanessa. They're struggling, Nadia. You don't have kids, so you don't understand. Family is supposed to help family. That last line always bothered me most because the help only seemed to go one way. Elena has admitted plenty of times that she knows Marcus takes advantage of me and that Mom lets him get away with it. But she's never willing to say any of that when they're actually in the room. So instead of standing up for me, I usually get a supportive text afterward. I appreciate it, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm the one sitting in Marcus's living room at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, watching Bluey for the fourth hour in a row while he and Vanessa are downtown at a brewery. By the time September finally arrived, I was more than ready to leave. My suitcases had been packed 4 days early. My out-of-office reply was on. My neighbor had a spare key to water my plants. My flight was leaving Austin at 7:40 on Friday evening, connecting through Chicago before landing in Madrid the next morning. I told my family about the trip as soon as I booked it, reminded them again in July, then again in August, and even posted the exact travel dates in our family group chat so nobody could possibly forget. Everyone knew I was leaving for Spain. Then, the Thursday before my flight, Marcus called. He didn't even bother with a proper hello. "Hey, Vanessa's mom fell and broke her hip. We have to drive to Richmond tomorrow to be with her. Can you take the kids for the day, maybe overnight?" I felt that familiar knot tighten in my chest. The reflex I'd spent years developing every time my family expected me to drop everything and say yes. But this time, I didn't let it win. "Marcus, my flight leaves tomorrow evening," I said. "I've been telling everyone about this trip for months. I can't watch the kids." There was a long silence before he spoke again, his voice like I'd just confessed to burning his house down. "Are you serious right now? Vanessa's mom is in the hospital." I told him I truly was sorry to hear that, and that I hoped she'd recover quickly, but I couldn't throw away a trip I'd spent 11 months planning because of a last-minute emergency that wasn't mine to solve. I suggested he call Mom, or one of Vanessa's friends, or hire a sitter. He hung up on me. Less than an hour later, my phone exploded. My mom. "Nadia, Marcus told me what happened. I can't believe you're being this selfish. His mother-in-law is in the hospital and you won't even help with the kids for one day. Elena, I know this trip means a lot to you, but maybe you could push your flight back a day. It would really help Marcus." Push my flight back, like changing an international vacation, was as simple as moving a dinner reservation. Then the family group chat lit up. Marcus wrote, "Asked Nadia to watch the kids while we deal with a family emergency. She said no because she'd rather go on vacation. Just thought everyone should know where her priorities are." My aunt replied, "Wow." My uncle wrote, "That's cold, Nadia." My cousin Nora sent a paragraph about how family should always come first. Then my mom sent one more message. Selfish. Just that one word, like a verdict. Within an hour, I'd been called selfish by 7 different people. Not one person asked what my side of the story was. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand, reading message after message, and something inside me quietly changed. It wasn't really anger. It was more like everything suddenly became clear. I realized that no matter how much of myself I gave to this family, it would never be enough. I could give up every weekend, rearrange my entire life, and always put Marcus first. But the moment I said no a single time, I instantly became the bad guy. Years of saying yes earned me absolutely no understanding when I finally chose myself. So I turned my phone off, finished packing my suitcase, went to bed early, and set my alarm for the next morning. Friday felt strangely unreal. I went into work, wrapped up everything that needed to be finished before my vacation, and kept reminding myself that in less than 14 hours, I'd finally be on a plane headed to the country I'd dreamed about visiting for years. Even with my phone powered off, I could almost feel the silence buzzing in my pocket. I caught myself reaching for it over and over before remembering I'd chosen to disconnect on purpose. During lunch, my coworker and close friend Marco noticed I wasn't acting like myself. Marco isn't the type to pry into people's business, but he's incredibly good at reading people. He looked at me and simply asked, "You okay?" That was all it took. I told him everything. Marcus's phone call, the group chat, all the messages, and how everyone kept throwing the word selfish at me like it was a weapon. Marco leaned back in his chair for a second before shaking his head. "Nadia, you've been talking about this Spain trip since February. You've got Spanish flashcards sitting on your desk every day. You've worked for this. You deserve to go. Don't let them take it away from you." Hearing someone else say those words out loud made something click inside me. He was right. I wasn't being selfish. I was simply acting like someone who had her own life, her own plans, and finally some healthy boundaries. That evening, I drove to the airport with my suitcase in the trunk and a knot in my stomach that refused to disappear. Part of me wanted to turn my phone back on just to see if anyone had finally calmed down. Another part of me wanted to call Marcus, apologize for everything, and offer to catch a flight a day later if it meant the fighting would stop. But I didn't do either of those things. I parked in the long-term lot, wheeled my suitcase through the terminal, checked my bag, and waited at my gate with a cup of coffee I barely even tasted. Right before boarding, I made the mistake of turning my phone back on for a few seconds. I don't even know why. Maybe I hoped someone had finally sent a kind message. Instead, I found 19 missed calls and a screen full of unread texts. The preview of the newest one from my mom read, "If you get on that plane, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving." I stared at those words for about 12 seconds without moving. Then I switched my phone off again, tucked it into my carry-on, and walked down the jet bridge without looking back. The flight to Chicago felt much longer than it was. I kept coming back to the same truth. I told everyone about this trip almost a year earlier, and reminded them again and again. Marcus hadn't asked for my help, he'd expected it. And instead of looking for another solution, my family had decided to make me the problem for refusing to be the solution this time. During my layover, I thought about everything I'd given up over 4 years. The Nashville trip, the concert tickets, the endless weekends of babysitting when I could have been building a life of my own. I'd always believed that if I kept giving enough, someone would eventually notice and tell me I'd done more than enough. That day never came. Instead, the first time I chose myself, I was cast as the family's villain. When we landed in Madrid on Saturday morning and I stepped into the warm Spanish air, I turned my phone back on while the plane was still taxiing to the gate. It took almost a full minute before everything finished loading, and when it did, my screen was flooded with notifications. 37 missed calls, 22 text messages, and 9 voicemails. I opened the texts first. Most of them were from my mom, and each one was more dramatic than the last. She went from sounding disappointed to furious, and eventually landed somewhere that could only be described as theatrical. One message read, "You have broken this family. I raised you better than this." My personal favorite said, "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." The funny thing is, my grandmother was the same woman who told me when I was 16 that I should never let anyone make me feel guilty for having plans of my own. Knowing her, I think she would have been thrilled that I finally made it to Spain. Marcus kept his messages short, but somehow they were even nastier. "Thanks for nothing. Real nice, Nadia. Hope your little vacation is worth losing your family over." That last message stayed with me because it didn't sound like an emotional outburst. It sounded like a threat. He was making it clear that choosing myself came with a price, and that price was being pushed out of the family. Vanessa only sent one text, but somehow it felt more manipulative than all the others combined. "I know you're on your trip. I just wanted you to know my mom made it through surgery and she's stable. Marcus and I figured everything out without you, but it wasn't easy. Hope you had a nice flight." The passive-aggressive tone was so obvious it practically jumped off the screen. Then there was Elena. As usual, she somehow managed to stand on both sides of the fence at once. "I know this trip was important to you, but everyone here is really upset. Maybe when you get back, you can reach out to Marcus and smooth everything over. Love you." Smooth everything over. As if I was somehow responsible for creating this mess, simply because I went on a vacation I'd planned for almost an entire year. I stood in the arrivals hall, surrounded by people hugging their loved ones, and I made a decision right then. I wasn't going to let my family's guilt ruin the first thing I'd done for myself in 4 years. I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb and walked out into the Madrid sunshine. The first few days were both incredible and emotionally exhausting. One minute I'd be admiring the colorful buildings, and then out of nowhere, guilt would crash over me like an emotional landmine. But over the course of that trip, I learned something important. Guilt is loudest in the beginning. The more distance you put between yourself and the people creating it, the quieter it becomes. Standing on the cliffs at Cabo de Roca, with the Atlantic stretching farther than I could see, I finally heard my own thoughts instead of everyone else's expectations. I spent 16 days traveling through Spain, and with every new place I visited, another layer of the person I'd become for everyone else slowly disappeared. In Barcelona, I walked across the Pont del Mar at sunset, taking pictures that honestly brought tears to my eyes because I was so grateful I'd chosen to come. Along the Costa Brava, I kayaked through sea caves where the water was so unbelievably blue it looked fake. In Marbella, I found a tiny family-owned restaurant where an older man named Mateo taught me how to say, "This is delicious" in Spanish. After I almost got the pronunciation right, he laughed, poured me a free glass of port, and told me I was close enough. Those little moments meant more to me than I expected. I only checked my phone once each day, just long enough to make sure nobody had died or ended up in the hospital. By the 5th day, the messages from my family had almost completely stopped. By day 8, the family group chat had gone completely silent about me, like I'd simply been erased from everyone's life. Nobody asked how Spain was. Nobody sent me pictures of the kids. Nobody said they missed me. That silence spoke louder than all the angry messages had. On the 12th day, Elena finally texted me. "Hey, how's Spain?" That was it. I replied with a picture of the sunset from the terrace of my place on the Costa Brava and wrote, "It's beautiful. I needed this more than I ever realized." She reacted with a heart and replied, "I'm glad. Things are pretty tense here, but I'll tell you everything when you get home." That was classic Elena. Just enough kindness to keep me close, but never enough information to prepare me for what was waiting. Something else happened during that trip that I never saw coming. I met someone. It wasn't romantic at first, at least not in the beginning. His name was Julian, and he was an American from Denver traveling around Europe by himself. We met in a small wine bar in Barcelona while I was sitting alone reading a book. He walked over, smiled, and asked if the empty seat beside me was taken. Normally, I would have politely answered and gone right back to reading. But being 2,500 miles away from everyone who expected me to be the responsible one somehow made me a little braver. We ended up talking for 5 straight hours. Julian was 29, worked as an environmental engineer, had this dry sense of humor that always caught me off guard, and carried himself with such a calm, easygoing confidence that I felt comfortable opening up almost immediately. I told him about my family. Not every painful detail, but enough for him to understand the situation. I explained how I'd spent my whole life being the dependable one, and how the first time I finally chose myself, everyone suddenly decided I was selfish. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he looked at me and said something I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. "The people who call you selfish for having boundaries are usually the ones who benefited the most when you didn't have any." Those words hit me like a freight train. A very calm, polite freight train, but a freight train all the same. Over the next few days, Julian and I explored the Costa Brava together. He took me to a hidden beach called Playa Dorada that he'd found on some travel blog. And I brought him back to Mateo's little restaurant where we laughed over another free glass of port. We talked about our families, our careers, our biggest fears, and what it felt like to always be the dependable person everyone leaned on. As it turned out, he understood exactly what I meant, because he'd spent years dealing with a younger sister who treated him like a personal ATM while his parents acted like that was completely normal. We both knew exactly what it felt like to be the one holding the family together while everyone else simply floated along. Always the anchor, never the people who got to drift. By the time my trip came to an end, we'd exchanged phone numbers and casually talked about him coming to visit me in Austin someday. I had no idea whether it would become anything serious, but I did know one thing. For the first time in years, someone saw me as an actual person instead of someone whose only value came from being useful. I flew back to Austin and landed a little after 10:30. The family group chat had already moved on to my cousin Nora's engagement party. I wasn't the headline anymore, just the uncomfortable subject everyone avoided. Monday morning, Marco looked at me and said, "Spain looks good on you." I laughed because he was right. I came home tanned, energized, and with a completely different perspective on my life. Over the next several weeks, I started changing little things. Nothing dramatic at first, just small decisions that slowly added up. One Wednesday evening, my mom called and asked if I could drive across town to pick up a prescription for her. The pharmacy was only a couple of minutes from her house, but she didn't feel like going herself. Normally, I would have dropped everything without thinking. Instead, I said, "Sorry, I'm busy tonight. Maybe Marcus or Elena can grab it." The silence that followed was almost impressive. She genuinely didn't know how to respond because she'd never heard me say no over something so small. That Saturday, Marcus texted asking if I could watch the twins while he and Vanessa went to a friend's housewarming party. I replied, "I've already got plans. Hope you can find a sitter." He never answered. Honestly, I counted that as progress because at least he didn't explode this time. Around that same period, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Bennett, and during one of our sessions, she explained something that seems painfully obvious now, but completely changed the way I looked at my life. I'd spent my entire childhood learning that my value depended on how useful I was to everyone else. I wasn't praised because I was me. I was praised because I was helpful, available, agreeable, and willing to sacrifice my own needs. The moment I stopped doing those things, the approval disappeared, which told me everything I needed to know about what kind of love it actually was. Dr. Bennett also helped me see something about Marcus that I'd never fully recognized before. He wasn't just taking advantage of my kindness. He was protecting a system that worked perfectly for him. As long as I believed I was responsible for solving his problems, he'd always have reliable free childcare whenever he wanted it. Every time I said yes, it reinforced the idea that my job was to make his life easier. Every time Mom defended him, she strengthened that belief even more. Saying no once wasn't enough. If I wanted my life back, I had to dismantle the entire pattern we'd all been living with for years. Meanwhile, Julian and I kept talking almost every day. In October, he flew to Austin for a long weekend, and we hiked, explored the city, and ate barbecue he insisted was better than anything back in Denver. Being with him felt easy. No guilt, no expectations, no emotional debt. By November, I wasn't the same woman who had boarded that flight to Madrid. I had boundaries, a therapist, someone who appreciated me for who I was, and a quiet confidence that couldn't be destroyed by angry group chats anymore. So, when Thanksgiving approached and my mom officially told me not to come, I wasn't crushed. On November 15th, exactly 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, she called and said, in the same tone people use to announce a legal decision, "Your father and I talked it over, and we think it's best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year. Marcus and Vanessa are still hurt, and we don't want any tension at the table." I was being disinvited because I went on a vacation I'd planned nearly a year in advance, a vacation everyone had known about for months, and the emergency that supposedly justified all of it. Vanessa's mother recovered fine within 4 weeks. Marcus and Vanessa hired a babysitter Friday, a friend helped Saturday, and they drove home Sunday. It lasted one weekend and was solved without any involvement from me at all. I stayed completely calm and simply said, "That's okay. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving." My mom clearly wasn't expecting that. I think she'd been waiting for me to cry, apologize, or beg to be invited back. Instead, I sounded like I was politely declining an invitation to a neighborhood cookout. She stumbled over her words for a moment before saying, "Well, I hope you'll use this time to think about what kind of daughter and sister you want to be." I answered, "I've actually been thinking about that for quite a while, Mom. That's exactly why I'm okay with this." She hung up without another word. Later that evening, I called Elena. She already knew I'd been uninvited, and to her credit, she sounded genuinely upset about it. "I told Mom she was taking it way too far," she admitted. "But she and Marcus completely agree, and Dad just goes along with whatever Mom wants." I told Elena I honestly wasn't angry anymore, and that was the truth. I'd moved past anger. I had reached that strange place where everything finally becomes clear, and instead of fighting the current, you simply let it carry you towards something better. There was a long pause before Elena quietly said something I never expected to hear. "I've been thinking about not going to Thanksgiving either. I know I've spent years staying out of all this, and I know that hasn't been fair to you. Maybe it's finally time I stop standing on the sidelines." I told her the decision had to be hers, and that I wasn't going to pressure her one way or the other. She thanked me and said she'd think about it. Around the same time, Julian had already planned to fly to Austin for Thanksgiving week. When I told him I'd officially been kicked out of my family's dinner, he didn't hesitate for even a second. He smiled and said, "Then we'll make our own Thanksgiving. I'll handle the cooking, you take care of dessert, and we'll invite the people who actually know how to appreciate you." That's exactly what we ended up doing. I invited Marco and his girlfriend, Danielle, along with my neighbor Grace, a widow who usually spent the holidays by herself, and my coworker Chloe, who couldn't afford to fly home to Vermont for Thanksgiving. Julian treated the menu like he was trying to win a cooking competition. Of course we had turkey, but he also made the most incredible roasted garlic mashed potatoes I'd ever tasted, homemade cranberry sauce with fresh orange zest, green bean casserole completely from scratch, and homemade cornbread stuffing. I handled dessert, making both a pumpkin pie and a pecan pie using recipes from my grandmother's old recipe box, which I'd inherited after she passed away. The week before Thanksgiving, 2 things happened that changed everything. First, Elena called to say she wasn't going to Mom's house after all. She'd told Mom that uninviting me was cruel, and Mom accused her of being ungrateful. But this time, Elena didn't back down. She booked a flight to Austin instead. The second surprise came from my dad, Walter, the quiet man who usually just sat in his recliner pretending to nap through family arguments. He called me out of nowhere on a Monday evening. Nadia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you say anything. Marcus had gone to him and Mom asking for money. Not a few thousand. $95,000. They'd refinanced their house for Vanessa's student loans, maxed out 2 credit cards on renovations, and were 3 months behind on their car payments. Their entire lifestyle had been running on borrowed money, and it was collapsing. Dad said loaning Marcus that much would wipe out their retirement safety net, but Mom wanted to do it anyway because that's what parents do. Then came the part that left me speechless. Mom's plan had been to ask me to contribute $25,000 toward it. The same daughter she'd called selfish. The same daughter she'd kicked out of Thanksgiving. Apparently my savings were still considered family property when Marcus needed them. I actually laughed. It was so ridiculous it circled back to being funny. Dad, I'm not giving Marcus $25,000, and I'm not pretending the way this family has treated me is acceptable. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, I know. And for whatever it's worth, I think you were right to go on that trip. I should have told you that a long time ago. Coming from my dad, that meant everything. Elena arrived Wednesday evening, and we stayed up past 1 a.m, talking about everything we'd avoided for years. Growing up, the roles we'd been forced into. What kind of sisters we wanted to be going forward. She'd started seeing a therapist, too. We made a promise that night. No more staying quiet, just to keep the peace. Thanksgiving morning felt nothing like any holiday I'd grown up with. By 8, Julian was already brining the turkey and humming to himself. Elena helped chop vegetables. Marco showed up with wine and a speaker blasting 80s R&B. Danielle brought flowers. Grace brought her sweet potato casserole and a story about her late husband that had everyone laughing 1 minute and wiping tears the next. It was easily the best Thanksgiving I'd ever had. 7 people crammed around a table that was too small, eating incredible food, laughing at things that probably weren't even that funny. No guilt, no obligation, just people who genuinely wanted to be there. In the middle of dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom's really upset. Elena isn't here either. Hope you're happy. I looked at it, smiled, set the phone face down, and asked Julian to pass the cranberry sauce. But I knew the real confrontation was still ahead. The Sunday after the holiday, Mom called a family meeting at her house. A discussion about the future of this family, which really just meant she wanted control of the room. Elena and I drove there together, talking through what we wanted to say. We weren't after revenge. We just wanted the truth finally said out loud in a house where it had been ignored for 25 years. When we walked in, Marcus sat with his arms crossed on the couch. Vanessa barely looked up from her phone, and Mom sat in her armchair like she was about to moderate a debate. But Dad wasn't pretending to sleep this time. He sat upright. And when I walked in, he looked me straight in the eye. That small gesture meant more than I can explain. Mom began. This family is falling apart, and I want us to fix it together. Nadia, I think you owe your brother an apology for how you handled everything back in September. Going forward, we all need to agree that family emergencies come before personal plans? I let her finish. Then I said, no. The room went silent. I'm not apologizing, I said calmly. I planned that trip for 11 months. I told all of you about it over and over. I gave more notice than most people give before a wedding. Then Marcus called the day before my flight and expected me to cancel everything. And when I said I couldn't, 7 different family members called me selfish within 2 hours. I was uninvited from Thanksgiving. Mom, you even told me Grandma would be ashamed of me over a vacation. Mom tried to interrupt, but I kept going, calm and steady, saying the words I'd practiced in therapy for 3 months. Over the past 4 years, I've watched Marcus's kids more than 50 times. I've canceled plans and missed things that mattered to me because they needed help. Not once did anyone acknowledge what I was giving up. It was never appreciated because it was always expected. The one time I said no, I became the villain. So no, I'm not apologizing because I didn't do anything wrong. Marcus finally spoke. Vanessa's mom was in the hospital, Nadia. That wasn't some random favor. I nodded. And I told you I was truly sorry about that. But you didn't ask me to help your mother-in-law. You asked me to babysit so you could drive to Richmond. Those are 2 different things. And let's be honest, you didn't even ask me. You told me. In 4 years, you've never once asked whether it worked for me. You just informed me what you needed and expected me to make it happen. He had nothing to say to that. He glanced at Vanessa, who suddenly seemed fascinated by the carpet. Then I asked the question I'd been carrying for months. Marcus, why do you think it's okay to treat me like I exist to make your life easier? Why is your time always more valuable than mine? He started getting defensive about the pressure of raising kids, but before he could finish, my dad cut him off. Marcus, she asked you a question. Answer it. My mom looked at him like he'd started speaking another language. Marcus finally mumbled, I don't think your time matters less. I just figured you'd want to help. I said, wanting to help and feeling like I have no choice are two completely different things. From where I've been standing, they never felt the same. Then Elena broke the silence. I need to say something too. I've watched this pattern for years and never said anything. That's on me. But what happened to Nadia in September was wrong. Uninviting her from Thanksgiving was wrong. And I know about the money. Marcus's face lost all its color. Vanessa's head snapped toward him. Mom closed her eyes. Dad told Nadia, and Nadia told me, Elena said. You asked Mom and Dad for $95,000, and Mom was planning to ask Nadia for $25,000 of it. The same Nadia you called selfish. The same Nadia you cut out of Thanksgiving. Apparently you wanted her money even though you didn't want her at the table. The silence was unbelievable. Vanessa clearly hadn't known anything about it. Marcus looked at Mom, furious the secret was out. Mom tried to regain control. Families help each other financially. There's nothing wrong with that. I shook my head. There is when the help only goes one way. That's not a family, that's a service. And I've been providing that service for free for years while being told it still wasn't enough. My dad spoke again. Diane, she's right. And I'm done pretending she isn't. We've expected more from Nadia than we ever expected from Marcus. Meanwhile, Marcus is buried in debt because he refuses to live within his means. None of that is Nadia's fault. Mom started crying. Real tears this time? I never wanted you to feel like you didn't matter, Nadia. I told her, but that's exactly how you made me feel. This didn't start in September. It's been years. Every problem Marcus had became a family emergency. Every need I had became an inconvenience. That ends today. I love all of you, but I'm never going to keep sacrificing myself just to make everyone else comfortable again. Marcus never fully apologized that afternoon. The closest he came was quietly admitting, I didn't realize it had gotten that bad. Vanessa caught me alone afterward and apologized for real. I knew Marcus depended on you way too much. I didn't stop it because it made my life easier. That wasn't fair. 3 days later, my mom called with a genuine apology. She'd been so focused on Marcus that she'd forgotten I had a life too, and asked to take me to lunch in Austin. I said yes. My dad never gave some big emotional speech. He just started calling every Sunday to ask how I was actually doing. Those calls became my favorite part of the week. Marcus and I are civil now, though I don't think we'll ever be especially close again. He and Vanessa eventually got financial counseling and downsized to a house they could actually afford. My parents never gave them the $95,000, and for the first time, Marcus had to face the consequences of his own choices. He hasn't once expected me to babysit since that meeting. When I help now, it's because I choose to. Elena and I have never been closer. She visits Austin every few months, and we've started taking a trip together every year. Next summer, we're going to Iceland. As for Julian, he moved to Austin in March for a job in environmental engineering. We found a place together in Riverside, close to great coffee shops and a Saturday farmer's market. He still makes those roasted garlic mashed potatoes every Thanksgiving, and they're still the best I've ever had. This past spring, we went back to Spain together. We stopped by Mateo's little restaurant in Marbella, and he actually remembered me. He poured us both a free glass of port and said something in Spanish that Julian translated, "The girl who came back." I loved hearing that. There was a time I honestly believed being a good person meant always saying yes to everyone. It took 37 missed calls, 22 angry texts, and 1 flight across the Atlantic to finally understand the truth. Being a good person doesn't mean sacrificing yourself every time someone demands it. It means protecting the life you've worked hard to build. It means recognizing that people who truly love you won't punish you for having boundaries or dreams of your own. And if they ever do, well, Spain will still be there, waiting,